Hey brother. So I've actually really been suffering quite a bit today, so I apologize if my energy isn't stellar, but really wanted to get this out to you before I disappear into the desolation wilderness. That's its real name. You might know it. So I'm going to try and do this in one take and cover the full week of exercises. Just looking at some of the finer points, and like you had requested earlier in your program, providing content that I don't have a critique of. Hopefully, not that I wouldn't have a critique of my own performance, but hopefully it's a little bit more clear than the YouTube videos that I've been able to link you to so far. So yeah, without further ado, we'll jump into it. Day one, you're doing legs, complete with the line jumps, the squat rockers, heel taps, front squats, or walking lunges if you're without equipment, without your X3. And then the skill board or hip airplane if you're without the skill board, and the kneeling transitions. So I'm just going to run that through in the way that your program is set up right now. You'd be running these each for 5 minutes continuously, with breaks in between kind of these supersets. So the line jumps, again, I think I showed you this to some degree. Let's see if I can get my feet in the frame. That's a little bit better. So I'm just using a line on the blanket here, and so I'm not even letting my weight rest back into my heels. I'm going back and forth, catching myself on my toes. And you can increase or decrease the intensity, going back and forth with more speed. You can increase the breadth of the jump, but trying to modulate and pace yourself for 5 minutes of continuous movement. So there might be a kind of peak in the middle, and then towards the end you might be simplifying. And what I would say about this one is to just really feel it in your knees. Try and create kind of a mind-muscle connection, and it's like specifically the tendons around the kneecap. Just sending your awareness there and feeling them stretch and catch you, and that elasticity in the knee capsule. The squat rockers, we've gone over these, but we can go again. Starting in this kind of crab position, you can walk it out some so your hips get more of a range of motion, shuttling through, coming forward and back. Again, pace yourself. You can increase the intensity. And last time I was really encouraging you to play with which arm you're throwing and catching with, making sure to alternate, and then coming forward. You know, if you want to play with really increasing the intensity as you come forward, that's fine. But again, trying to pace yourself for 5 minutes of continuous movement, probably with a peak of intensity somewhere towards the midline of that time stretch. Heel taps. So ideally you're slightly elevated for this one. I had a 2x4 here that I use for balancing on. Can you see it? It's tough. So elevating the planted foot and then driving the heel down. And the way to increase the intensity on this one would either be, I'll give you a couple of ways. One way would be to just really focus on getting your hips in line with your knee and your shoulder in line with your hips. So you're driving down really in a straight line. The knee that's bending is in the same angle as the foot that's going down, and your body is following that same angle as well. So that just requires, you know, especially for me, I've got such a big barrel chest that you really lean back, and that just puts basically more shearing force on the knee. Again, really focusing on those tendons, feeling their stretch and accommodation around the kneecap. Another way to increase the intensity on this one would be to elevate the planted foot further. Ultimately, this is kind of a pistol squat regression. So you're coming down. My pistol squat is not where it could be, but you're coming down all the way. I wouldn't call that a pistol squat, but you get the idea that the principle of driving your knee out until your heel taps can continue, and as you elevate or as you increase the angle at which you're driving your heel out, the further your hips ultimately drive down, ending eventually in the pistol. But that's not what I'm asking you to do, just doing the heel taps for now, which is preceding the front squats or the walking lunges. So I have my modified X3 bar here. Let's see if we can get something similar. I haven't referred to the X3 video in a while. He had a unique execution of the front squat. I think he got into it down in the front, down in the squat position. And then if I remember, he basically just held his arms out like a zombie. And coming up, I don't think I've ever put this much tension on this band, so I'm a little trepidatious, but yeah, so the front rack position is obviously a little bit precarious. I'm noticing with the band tension really having to drive my elbows forward, and I think that's why they probably did it with the arms straight out. For that movement, again, it's really targeting the top of the quads, which, you know, attaches to the knee. So really paying attention to that quad firing, and trying to remain as vertical as possible as you descend, maintaining that in part by driving the knees out and kind of just, Ed Cohen would say, split your taint. Another cue that I've heard that can be useful is try and break the earth open with your feet. So you're like driving without moving your feet, keeping them planted, but driving your feet away from each other with the isometric tension as you descend, opening your taint, accommodating your spine down as it sinks into the hip. You should feel articulation in the SI joint. That's usually pretty locked up for people that might be, you know, more of a like 6 to 12 month accomplishment. But you can certainly pay attention. So really paying attention to the upper, or rather the lower quads, the low back, and that upright position, driving the knees out through that movement. Your no equipment variation is the walking lunge. Hang up my X3 bar here. And that's pretty simple. I think we went through this before, kind of taking a pretty large, generous step and driving all the way down. My heel is coming off the ground. I'm focusing on, that wasn't a good example of this, but before I start to descend, I really try and lock in this glute so that as I descend, I'm not accommodating the range of motion by bending in the knee. I'm really getting this nice opening hip flexor stretch, and that will really, I mean, glute firing is one of the best skills that you can have in your quiver. If you're really good at firing your glutes, it's the largest muscle in your body, and the hips are the strongest joint. So if you're good at firing your glutes, you're pretty much good at everything. It translates into everything. And most people in our culture, conditioned by chairs and just a sedentary lifestyle, have really poor firing through their glutes. Especially in my left side, you'll see the difference. Really struggle. What starts to happen for me is my hamstrings start to take over, and they'll start to cramp and Charlie horse because they're trying to do my glutes job. So paying attention to that back leg, the front leg is obviously getting the load, but you're getting a lot of isometric tension through locking in that back leg. And yeah, you'll find that you're accumulating quite a bit of fatigue in the movement through really focusing on locking in that back glute. And then just letting the front leg do what it does. Definitely letting the heel come off the ground if that increases your range of motion. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that I could go into for that, but I'll leave it relatively simple for your sake here. Skill board is not something I have on hand, but spending 5 minutes trying to throw yourself off balance, basically. I could do a little bit on the 2x4 here. Again, trying to get it in frame. Good enough. So, you know, I could pretend that I have really good balance by just walking like this, and I imagine on a skill board it would be very similar. You could find a way of moving on it that is not very challenging, and you could maintain that for 5 minutes. But in terms of progressing skill and stability and increasing neuroplasticity, especially with balance, it's really good for brain health and the vestibular system. Trying to throw yourself off and noticing how you catch when your weight is really shifting a lot. And of course, trying not to use your hands like I had to do there. You know, pretending that you're 100 feet in there and don't have an option to fall, can be useful for framing that exercise and just increasing your strict adherence to the skill itself rather than getting good at catching yourself in a controlled environment. And then basically what you saw me do there on the 2x4 is a hip airplane, which would be your no equipment variation. The video that I sent you on this was excellent from Kabuki Strength. Chris Duffin is an excellent scientist and powerlifter, and I don't think he's actually in the video, but his team does a really good job explaining this movement and its benefits. But it's like a 20-minute long video. Hopefully this video won't be that long. I just got a notice that my phone is about to die, so let's keep that strict. So the hip airplane coming into roughly a 45-degree angle with the shoulders in line with the knee. So the shoulders go forward as the knee goes back in relation, and then taking the arms wide and really dropping this hip in relation to the planted hip. So you're kind of closing the door here and then opening it here. And so you can see hinging on this planted hip, really going through that full range of motion, opening and closing the door, as it were, coming into 45 again on the other side, dropping the hip down in. Whew. Little out of practice, and opening it back up. You can see just how wobbly that was for me. Hopefully after now a month of practice for you, it's getting a little bit cleaner. But yeah, it has enormous benefit for the hip joint health, as well as providing the balance training stimulus, which has all of the effects that we talked about for the skill board and the 2x4 walking. Kneeling transitions. I promise we're getting through this. We went through this one before, so I'll just demonstrate it quickly. Coming back onto the flat, the top of your foot, and kind of giving that a little press at the end there, and then tucking the toes. Whew! Not that quickly. So tucking the toes and catching yourself in this kind of resting position. You can drive the heels back if you want. So that would be kind of the accelerator, the gas pedal on your intensity. 5 minutes of doing this is quite a lot of stimulus. So if some of the reps are a little bit shorter range, that's probably good at the beginning and at the end, but maybe somewhere towards the middle, you're really driving your heels down into that full range of motion, even widening your hips and going deeper, coming forward, and really going back onto your toes. You could even hang out here for a minute once you're warm. But you probably couldn't do that for the whole 5 minutes, so kind of warm up to that and then take your foot off the gas towards the end. So day 3, luckily we have line jumps and squat rockers again. We went through that. The renegade rows or body weight rows. So renegade, don't really have my equipment with me. We'll use our handy dandy X3 bar. I think you know from working with Kels, you get into a plank, maybe a wide plank, gives you a little more stability, and pulling up. So you could, I would probably recommend with the kettlebells that you have, setting up both of them, holding one as your base and alternating through, I guess it would be 250 and 250 so that each arm is getting a balanced stimulus. On that one, really just paying attention to core stability as much as you can, and the strictness of the row, really getting the scapula to retract, keeping your elbow close to your body. But your core is probably what's going to be the limiting factor on that movement, at least in my experience. So really bringing your attention and awareness into the deep core stabilizers around your hips. Chest press or diamond push-ups. Get our handy dandy X3 bar in position. And his videos might be the preferred videos for these. They're not, preventatively long. And yeah, my main, this is probably quite a bit easier than what you'd be performing just because of the, adaptation I'm making with the bands that I have. What I want you to pay attention to is on this eccentric portion of the press, keeping your elbows really locked in, and feeling your lats and upper back engage in that, the bottom of the movement. And then as you press out, you can start to let your elbows flare a little bit, but only really so much as it affords you more power. So what you want to do is train your triceps to really take over that real estate, that chicken wing real estate, when you're really gassing out. So with this amount of tension, I don't really have to flare my elbows, but that's just something that I would pay attention to as you're kind of greasing that movement up. You see it in the push-up too. People have a really bad habit of going out to the side, and it's bad for a lot of reasons. The most convincing of which I think is that you're just losing a lot of torque. So if you grease the movement out here, then when you're out of torque, you don't have any more room to go. So, but when you're really out of torque here, you can take over that real estate and use it to your advantage, but only if you start kind of tucked in. So that's your row to press. The body weight variation is the diamond push-up. What I would say for that is, again, paying attention to how far out your elbows want to go. With your hands so close in, they might want to kind of sprawl. So trying to keep them tucked and letting them sprawl as you run out of torque, and just finding a place on your chest that you're touching every time so that your reps aren't drifting throughout this range, but really trying to execute with precision. And it'll be slightly different based on your limb lengths, etc. Just whatever feels great for you, and just finding that place, creating that proprioceptive cue, and repeating. I think we're getting close to being done with day 3. Shoulder circles and shoulder rolls. So the shoulder circles, it's really a bit of a break from all this rowing and pressing. We're gonna do really nice, slow, smooth circles. And yeah, although the intensity is a little bit boring, 5 minutes of this you'll really burn. The approach would be to split up that 5 minutes into 250 and 250, 250 going rather 230. We're on the units of 60. And so yeah, 2.5 minutes going backward, and then 2.5 minutes going forward. If you do want to play with the intensity some, that's fine, but making sure that at least at the beginning and at the end, your movement is really under quite a bit of control. You don't want to have parts of the circle where you're moving faster or slower. You know, if I start doing this, you'll see there's kind of this like catch point where it slows down and then it speeds up. So really trying to smooth that out. And then the shoulder rolls. This was one I saw you struggling with. I'm just gonna check my battery. I couldn't check it, but let's see how this goes. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of progress this movement for you and get it more smooth. So I think that maybe the backwards roll is actually the place to start rather than the forward roll. And you can go back really, really slowly if you have the muscular control. And then, I don't know how well you can see, I think you can see. So I plant this arm, I'm gonna roll over the opposite shoulder. So I plant the opposite arm to create a little cubby for my head. And so you can do it in that really slow, deconstructed fashion. And really trying to make it so that there's no pressure on your head at all, depending on, you know, your bone structure and everything. It might not even touch the ground. Again, I'm a little bit rusty here. But yeah, trying to create that sling. So going forward, what that looks like, maybe I'll start on one knee, is like this. So you can see between my shoulder planted and my hand planted, my neck is actually floating. And I kick through. I don't have a lot of space here, but I hope that was clear. And yeah, so really just trying to make that space for your head and neck between the shoulder and the planted hand. And maybe that's just what you do, is just feeling that position and start playing with your weight going over. Same with the backward position, not necessarily committing all the way through, but excuse me, just feeling this position here and how you can create space for your head. And then, you know, we'll start to increase the intensity and increase the, what would you say, velocity of that movement. Cool, so I'm gonna leave it at that. I think we're all coming up on a half an hour. I think that's plenty of instructional for the time being. I will try to get another video out to you with the rest of the movements while I'm traveling. Yeah, but I don't want to send you an hour-long YouTube video here, so I'm gonna chunk it up a little bit. Let me know how this lands, if it was useful, and yeah, the new moon is Sunday, so I hope that you can carve out just 20 minutes of your day, either Sunday or a day before or after, and just be with your body. Yeah, 20 minutes might sound like a long time to move with yourself in an intuitive way. I think I put it in the program as stretching, so if there are like particular stretches that you feel called to, or just that you have in your quiver, definitely take those out, but I would encourage you to just drop into a listening space and see what emerges in those 20 minutes. And yeah, maybe it'll be nothing and it'll be really strict, boring, 90-second hamstring stretches consecutively. But yeah, be open to learning something, I think, is the right attitude. So, and at that point, we'll add some volume. If you feel up for 45 minutes in the mornings, that's what we'll do. We'll just keep adding volume in these 5-minute set cycles. If that is starting to feel cumbersome, we'll come up with another way to manage your volume. So yeah, I hope this was useful. Would love to get your feedback and just let me know how the program is going for you. I love you so much. Take care out there.